Shoot some with the beat.
I ain't tryna die young, so I ride with one. Man, we fall into the system and full of war. 12 cut that boy Jason, man, they doing wrong. Man, my city full of hatred, can we get along? I got murder on my mind, man, this feeling.
What's good, YouTube? It's your boy Kari back in another video. We got a reaction video for y'all. We're gonna be reacting to the new PS5 controller. PS5, bro. PS5. Make sure y'all like, comment. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. You know what I'm saying? So all you gotta do is press the red button. That's all you gotta do. Let's get into this video.
Today, Sony surprise announced the brand new DualSense controller for the PS5, and it is, well, it's different, that's for sure. There are a ton of new features, so let's jump straight in. First of all is that DualSense name. The idea is that as opposed to focusing on the DualShock like we've had since the very beginning, instead the DualSense name is more so about a better haptic feedback experience. So part of that comes down to what is supposedly better haptic feedback inside the actual controller itself. So I'm going to quote Sony as saying that it adds a powerful sensation like the slow grittiness of driving a car through mud, which I'm not sure how that gives you a strong sensation. But yeah, supposedly the actual haptic feedback motors have been significantly improved from the DualShock 4. However, that is only just the beginning of what makes this new PS5 controller so, unique. I'm gonna find a lot of interesting ways to not call this thing ugly in this video. There are now adaptive triggers built into the L2 and the R2 trigger buttons. Now, this is something that the Xbox One has had, well, since the Xbox One first came out. However, I'm going to be very curious to see how Sony implements this with the DualShock 5 moves, where you would actually get some vibrations in the actual triggers, say when you're playing Forza and you brake too hard and your ABS locks or something like that. There have been many rumors, and if you've seen any of our coverage of the PS5 as well as the Series X, you'll know that the Series X has the lead right now. It is a more powerful console, and even in the best case scenario, the PS5 is like 20% slower in many cases. But realistically, based on how much it throttles, it may be even more. So it does make sense to me that Sony is focusing less on the actual raw pixels and the pure performance, and much more so on the experience that the PlayStation 5 and therefore the DualSense controller can give you. Now, if you take a look at the controller itself, you'll see that it is very clear they have changed not only the size but the shape. So Sony talked a little bit about this in their blog post, which of course I'll have linked in the description. But essentially, it seems to be a little bit of a sharper angle. They claim that this is done partially to fit a lot of these extra technologies, such as all these different haptic feedback motors and everything. But just like with the Xbox Series X, I do believe that this is also a play to just make these controllers more family-friendly, more friendly for all gamers of all sizes of shapes of hands. Sizes and shapes of hands. Sizes and shapes of hands. The quarantine is getting to me. Now, based on whether or not you fall on the PlayStation or the Xbox side of the camp, you may or may not be happy to see that the standard dual stick layout has returned. This is not really a surprise. Of course, the Xbox One has always had the offset sticks, which I personally prefer, but the DualShock has always had that, and of course it comes over to the DualSense controller. Now, beyond that, there are also some interesting design decisions. So look at this image. Take a close look at it. Do you see anything weird? It's
like in the corner of my eye.
I almost called it ugly. It's a unique two-tone white and black color finish. Now, personally, I'm not against trying something different, and as we'll talk a little bit about later, the Xbox Series X certainly does not push very far in that front. And while I'm definitely not a huge fan of it at this sort of first impression, I feel like as we spend more time with it, it will probably start to grow on me. But it's unique. And side note, I feel like this gives us a very good idea of what the actual PlayStation 5 will look like. This kind of design language, and certainly this two-tone color scheme seems like an absolute lock for that PS5, which I'm not totally against. I feel like when you look at the PS4, it is certainly a little bit on the angular side, a little bit on the boring side, whereas this gives it a little bit more of a future robot look. Now, because the DualSense controller still requires backwards compatibility with the PS4 games, which you will be able to play on the PS5, it still has a light bar. However, the light bar has been moved from the back of the controller to around the touchpad, which also is still prominently featured on the DualSense controller. This is something which I feel like is almost more of a legacy thing than anything else. I mean, it's cool to see, you know, the different lights that you have on the controller, but like, does anyone really care about the light bar? I will say one thing. Sony definitely took a shot at Xbox when you look through this press release, talking about how it has strong wireless battery life with its rechargeable battery. You know, the thing that The Xbox Series X still doesn't actually ship within the box. So kudos for Sony for still shipping a rechargeable battery like they've been doing since 2006. Now, one thing that is missing, or at least has been changed, is the lack of a share button. So Sony are being very coy with this one. So instead of having a traditional share button, which before you would be able to use to take screenshots, record video, or go live on Twitch, or whatever you wanted to do, instead they're taking advantage of a create button, which, quote, they will be focusing on sharing more details later. That's actually not a direct quote, that's a paraphrase. Honestly, one of the biggest features might actually be one of the ones that you can't really see from the photos, but is the fact that the new controller actually has a built-in microphone array. This actually seems like kind of a no-brainer. Now, well, of course, you can still use a headset with the controller, but as far as I'm concerned, this makes a lot of sense. It might not be the highest quality audio in the world, but there have been plenty of times where I wish I had a microphone and I didn't have to go dig through like a headset or something. Instead, having it built directly into the controller itself, while yes, you might get a lot of button presses and clicking noises or whatever, but that is a major new feature. And of course, the controller is taking advantage of USB-C, just like on the Series X. Which brings me to, I think, one of the biggest comparison points here, which of course is that Xbox Series X controller. Having spent some time really using the Series X controller, it is very, very similar to the Xbox One. Now, well, yes, they've slightly adjusted the grip, so it's a little bit more comfortable for smaller hands, and they do have a nice new texture compared to the Xbox One, but generally speaking, it is a very, very similar controller. Now, that was not a bad thing when I first tried it. However, now that we're looking at this DualSense controller, it is, I don't want to say it's looking a little bit out of date, but it is certainly not as forward-thinking as what Sony has here. And I actually think that some of the stuff, if they really pull off the motion, if they really pull off things like the microphone, and they have a built-in rechargeable battery, could make a real difference. In many ways, this looks like an expensive controller, but importantly, it looks like something which Sony really has spent a lot of time on to develop it into something that's not just the DualShock 5, which I'm going to probably call this controller many, many times before it actually comes out. But when you put it side by side with what you're getting on the Series X, it does seem like, while I might not be the biggest fan of the looks at the moment, it does seem like a major step forward. So I'm really curious, what do you guys think about the DualSense controller for the PS5? And what do you think about some of the things that really tells us about the PlayStation 5? Again, we are getting very, very close to the time where we need to see this PlayStation 5, and we're kind of getting this little bit of information dripped and dropped, dripped and dropped, dripped and dropped, dripped and dropped. So
that's it in this video. Hope y'all enjoyed. You should leave a like, subscribe if you're new to the channel. You know what I'm saying? More videos coming soon. Fire videos. I'm gone.